Jason Voorhees, Unmasking the Mind Behind the Monster. Few names in horror inspire as much terror as Jason Voorhees. From a tragic backstory to an almost supernatural resilience, Jason has haunted the nightmares of moviegoers for over 4 decades. But how did a boy who drowned in a lake become one of cinema's most relentless killers? Let's explore the legend of Jason Voorhees. The origin of Jason Voorhees. Jason Voorhees first appeared in 1980's Friday the 13th, but not as the hockey-masked killer we know today. He was a tragic figure, a young boy with physical deformities who drowned at Camp Crystal Lake due to the negligence of the camp counselors. His grieving mother, Pamela Voorhees, took brutal revenge, killing anyone connected to the camp. It wasn't until the sequel, Friday the 13th Part 2, 1981, that Jason rose from the depths of Crystal Lake, avenging his mother's death. Armed with a burlap sack over his head and a machete, Jason began his reign of terror. But it was Friday the 13th Part 3, 1982, that introduced the hockey mask, cementing his iconic look. The evolution of Jason. Jason evolved over the series, becoming more than just a mortal man. In Friday the 13th Part 6, Jason Lives, 1986, he was resurrected by lightning, transforming into an unstoppable undead force. This shift added a supernatural edge to the character, allowing him to survive everything from explosions to drowning, again. The franchise also experimented with unique settings. From stalking victims in Manhattan to wreaking havoc in space, Jason proved that his thirst for vengeance knows no bounds or logic. The man behind the mask. The men who portrayed Jason brought him to life in unforgettable ways. Kane Hodder, who played Jason in 4 films, is often regarded as the definitive Jason. His physicality and menacing presence elevated the character to new heights. Jason in popular culture. Jason isn't just a horror icon, he's a cultural phenomenon. From appearances in Mortal Kombat to countless parodies in shows like The Simpsons, Jason's reach extends far beyond the Friday the 13th series. The fan community has embraced Jason, turning him into a symbol of horror fandom. His image graces everything from action figures to Halloween costumes, ensuring that his legacy endures. So, why does Jason Voorhees remain so terrifying? Perhaps it's his silence, his unrelenting pursuit of his victims, or the tragic backstory that makes us sympathize with him, if only for a moment. Jason embodies our primal fear of the unstoppable force, a reminder that sometimes the past can never be buried. Jason Voorhees has carved out his place in horror history with a machete and a mask. Whether he's haunting Crystal Lake or your nightmares, one thing is certain: Jason will never die. Psychological profile. Jason's entire identity is anchored to his relationship with Pamela Voorhees. Her posthumous influence, whether through hallucinations, delusions, or supernatural manipulation, dictates his motives and targets. Dependency. Jason lacks a sense of self outside his role as Pamela's avenger. Her decapitation triggered a permanent psychological schism, transforming him into a killing machine devoid of moral nuance. Projection. Counselors and outsiders to Camp Crystal Lake become stand-ins for the negligent figures who caused his original trauma. Evaluation. Jason's maternal obsession suggests deep-seated abandonment fears and an inability to form independent moral reasoning. His vengeance is less a deliberate choice and more a conditioned response. Communication and mutism. Jason's mutism is symbolic of his inability to express himself verbally or emotionally. This likely stems from a combination of developmental issues and emotional trauma. Silence as a weapon. By remaining silent, Jason becomes an enigma to his victims, amplifying their terror. Non-verbal expression. Jason's violence becomes his sole method of communication, replacing words with actions. Evaluation. Jason's silence underscores his disconnection from humanity. It transforms him into a figure of raw instinct rather than reasoned intent. Moral disengagement and impulsivity. Jason operates with an almost animalistic moral framework. His actions are not rooted in traditional notions of right or wrong, but rather in reactive survivalism. Selective morality. Jason spares certain individuals, e.g. children, suggesting that he operates on an instinctive code rather than indiscriminate violence. Impulsivity. His kills are often opportunistic and driven by proximity rather than premeditated strategy. Evaluation. Jason's lack of introspection or empathy is indicative of his regression to a pre-socialized primal state. Supernatural elements. Jason's transition from mortal to supernatural being introduces unique psychological complexities. His resurrections and apparent immortality elevate his behavior beyond traditional diagnoses. Loss of mortality. Jason's repeated resurrections diminish any fear of consequence, reinforcing his relentless pursuit of victims. Symbolic purpose. Post-resurrection, Jason ceases to exist as an individual and becomes a manifestation of vengeance and inevitability. Evaluation. Jason's supernatural attributes strip him of autonomy, transforming him into a symbol rather than a psychologically analyzable human. Behavioral patterns. Victim selection. Jason's victims are typically those who encroach upon his territory, Camp Crystal Lake, or embody behaviors his mother would deem immoral, e.g. promiscuity, substance abuse. Projection of moral code. Jason internalized Pamela's moral judgments, targeting those she would consider guilty. Territorial instinct. Jason's relentless defense of Camp Crystal Lake is more animalistic than strategic, akin to a predator guarding its den. Key insight. Jason's victimology reflects a conflation of personal trauma and inherited moralistic aggression. Killing methods. Jason's kills are brutal, often utilizing weapons of opportunity such as machetes, axes, or even bare hands. Symbolic violence. The physicality of Jason's kills reflects his suppressed rage and lack of verbal expression. Efficiency over sadism. Unlike Freddy Krueger, Jason does not toy with his victims. His kills are swift and pragmatic. Key insight. Jason's violence lacks the sadistic enjoyment seen in other killers, emphasizing his role as an unfeeling force rather than a calculating predator. Reasons behind his behavior. Unresolved trauma. Jason's drowning and abandonment created an enduring psychological scar, driving his violence as a means of reclaiming power. Maternal influence. Pamela Voorhees' vengeance and moral judgments are the blueprint for Jason's actions, even after her death. Loss of humanity. Jason's transformation into a supernatural entity removes him from the bounds of human morality, reducing him to instinct and vengeance. Symbolic function. Over time, Jason transcends individuality, becoming an embodiment of death and inevitability, no longer governed by personal motives. Conclusion and evaluation. Jason Voorhees is a paradoxical figure, a killer we fear yet pity, a victim who creates more victims, and a man who has become a myth. His behavior is the result of compounded trauma, supernatural interference, and a primal need to avenge his mother. While his actions are monstrous, they are rooted in a twisted sense of justice and loss. Jason is not evil in the traditional sense. He is a force of nature, a product of neglect and tragedy, who speaks to our deepest fears about abandonment, inevitability, and the thin line between humanity and monstrosity. Key closing question. If Jason had been saved from drowning, would he still have become the monster we know today? If you enjoy this video, then please consider liking and subscribing to my channel and follow on X and Instagram. Thank you all for listening.